All right, so let's have a look, first of all, at the skeleton generator window. The window, you can get it from the skeleton menu, Human HIK, here, or under Window Animation Editor, Human IK, Skeleton Generator. It's really just the same window. This is what pops on. Let me just grab the outliner here so that we see what Maya creates. All right. First thing we need to notice is that, yes, it's all grayed out. So you can either go to Skeleton, Create, or you can press the little yellow button here. And if we just hover over the little button, it will say Create a new character. While under Skeleton, right, it's Create. This is a bit confusing. Maya creates exactly the same thing. A biped character facing the z-axis with a top node that's a locator and palms facing down. These are the default values right now, so we'll be looking at how to change that. All right, so it's just a basic skeleton. The first we can do is rename our character. I can call it test. Oops, not yes, sorry. Test. And just click on OK. And it goes ahead and renames all the nodes, which is pretty smart. So you only have to rename it there. It's much better to name it here than in the outliner directly. This Maya just does everything for you. We can scale it up or down, and yes, it will the character scale will always go back to 1. We can add some spine joints. We can add some neck joints, some shoulder joints, some extra fingers, some toes, and all the different options that we have here. It's good to know, though, that the spine count has limits of 10. The neck count is also a limit of 10. The shoulder count has a limit of 2, but it needs to be jiggled. And the finger count has a limit of 3, and a toe joint count has a limit of 3 also. All right. So I'm just go ahead and reset this. So we're back to our default skeleton. If the skeleton doesn't fit properly in your model, you will want to go ahead and move things around. Right? You can encounter this problem here. Right? It's a warning. The warning has nothing to do with HIK. Right? Some joints get it, like the shoulder joint and the clavicle, but it has everything to do with the automatic joint orient, which should be on by default depending on your preferences. So if I get that error, just make sure to turn that off. All right. I can just go ahead and move all of these joints, right? And give me, something gorgeous that fits my model perfectly. Once I'm happy with it, I can go to mirror left and right. There you go. So it just mirrors it. It's mirror left to right. Sadly, it's not right to left, and it cannot be right to left. So make sure it's just a habit to take to when you set up to your model, make sure you do it on the left side. Another thing that you do need to keep in mind is when you move these and you set it up, I'm going to do something pretty drastic here so that we see the differences, right? I'm going to move this here. Oops, sorry, this one here, right? When I bring up my window, there you go. All my edits are gone. So when you do edit your skeleton, it really is important to keep your skeleton generator window open. Even, you keep it hidden behind your tool setting or your attribute editor or any other window. Just make sure that it's always on. The edits are not saved or not kept in memory unless that window is open. It's just one of those little bugs that once you know, you can work around. Another thing to know is that HIK is always wide down the bone. All right, so if I show my local rotation axis, you'll see that all of them are the default rotate order, and that's just how HIK is. I can go and change the skeleton and make it all the rotations that I want, but when I create my rig, you got to remember it's one of those automatically created rig, and it doesn't take in the skeleton rotate order. So it really is important that you keep them at the default. Otherwise, you might get some misbehaving. Once we're happy with this, we can lock our character, right? And we should be able to go into the characterization now, right, and create. Before we do that, one thing I want to show is the template, right? I can export a template, and I can open it in Notepad. Oops. And open it in Notepad. Oh, okay, I gotta pass all this because this crap. I just want to get to my window. I thought I had it open. Shit, where is it? Projects. New projects. Okay, let's do it again. All right, so I can export it, and once I've exported it, I can bring in and have a look at it. And just Notepad++. Okay, let's do that again. All right, I can do, I can export it. Once I've exported it, I can look at it in Notepad. All right, so I just put them together side by side, right? And really quickly, the first thing to notice that this template is all the joints possible with HIK, right? Even though they're not created, like for example here, it's giving me 9 spine joints, even though I've only set it to 3. It's giving me again 9 neck joints, and so on and so forth. So it's giving me literally all the joints possible and their position, rotation, and scale. And yeah, the rotation are always going to be 0, and the scaling is also always going to be 1. HIK just assumes your scaling is 1. So this is kind of not really useful, but if I go and scale my character to something crazy and start moving it around, all right, so if I start moving my character around and I want to import this, there you go. So it didn't create the joints that are in the template. All right, so it's data that is really not useful because A, I didn't export it. I didn't want to export it because I didn't create them. So, but when I read it back in, I'm still just getting the positions, right? So the template is really just the positions of the joints that you currently have in your rig. It won't create joints if you don't have them, and it won't, delete the ones that you already have, obviously. All right, so once I'm happy with this, I can just go ahead and lock this. If we have a quick look at the nodes that HIK creates, there's which is the character node, right? So I name my character test. This gives me a min rotation and a max rotation on the joints, on all the joints. I've gotten this to work, right? Setting a max rotation limit. I don't particularly find it very useful, so I won't be showing it, but if you want to use it, it's there. And I've tested it and it works. HIK property window, we're going to look into this window a lot more later on. There's the skeleton generator node window, which looks exactly like the setting on our skeleton generator window. Sadly, it's not one that drives this window, right? It's just kind of the default values that are there. There's an HIK solver node, and there's an HIK state, which will just give us all the values, all the position. All right, so another thing that we need to know with HIK is that the local rotation axis that normally in Maya we love to change and set up the way we want, HIK only has the local rotation axis. So it's X down the bone, right? Or X, Y, Z. You obviously can change it because this is just a skeleton, but when we create our control rig, you have to remember, right, this is one of those automatically created rig. These won't be taken into consideration. So you will get some misbehaving. So it's a good idea to keep the rotate order the default. Once we're happy with our skeleton, we can export a template for future use. And oh, sorry, I just need to unlock this. For future use, we just can export a template. Right. I'll go to export template and I'll just call it test here. Right. And then let's go ahead and have a look at this. Right. And I like Notepad+. And we'll quickly see that this template is actually all the nodes and all their position, rotation, and scale value, right? But of all the nodes that can possibly be created with HIK. So it's not the ones that are currently created, because as you can tell, I have 3 spine joint and 1 neck joint, but the template gives me a lot more than that. So it's carrying a lot of data that's not necessarily and not useful in any way. I would either want to not write out the information, or at least when you read it back in, just create it so that I can go and tweak this particular template. But it's actually just all the nodes that can possibly be created, even though they're not currently created. I have all the extra fingers, all the foot pinkies and everything, even though they're not there now. But if I can scale this, or if I move something incorrectly, I can always bring it back in. And I'll get my character. At least it's the character that I had previously and not only just the default. If we go ahead and look at the nodes that HIK creates, first of all, there's a test node, which is the name of the character, so it's the HIK character node. It will allow you to do min and max rotation limits. I have tested it. It does work. It's not very useful in my opinion, so I won't go ahead and show any more of this, but if you want it, it's definitely there, and I have gotten it to work. There's the HIK properties. We will be having an in-depth look at the HIK properties later on when we do the retargeting. Right? So you just need to know right now that a lot of settings are there. There's the HIK skeleton generator node, which very much looks like this generator window. Sadly, it's not what drives it. It's kind of just the basic, default values of everything. The solver node and the state. Right, so if we have a look at the HIK state, you'll see that it has a translate, rotation, and scale value. And it's important to know that these are relative. So if I go back to my template, right, and remember the template was all those values of all those joints and their position, right? So these are absolute. So if I just look at the hip, obviously is to 100, which will have 100 here. The left up leg is 1993, so 19 and 6. So obviously the left up is relative to the hip, which is really typical in Maya. So these are values that we know and we're used to seeing. All right. Once we're happy with all these, we go ahead and we can lock our character. It will give us a characterized successfully. And we'll go ahead and move the characterization of this. But before doing that, I just want to have a quick look on how to create your own skeleton and what you need to have in your own particular skeleton to use HIK. So we'll go ahead and do that now.